The collect reminds us that we have no right to be here. These collects, by the way, are dense in meaning, theology and spirituality. We beseech thee, the spirit of always thinking and doing what is right, so that we who cannot exist except through thee may live according to thy will. Existence. On this first Sunday of August, there is a request from on high through mystic Mother Eugenia that we should remember these facts by honouring the origin of our being, God the Father, sometimes forgotten in our devotions. The apex, the source, everything comes from the Eternal Father, as in a family. And by the way, you fathers, remember, you cannot abdicate or pass the buck. It stops here. The Father bears the authority of God the Father and should exercise it well and with firmness, not forgetting his power to bless both the children and the table. It is his privilege in the Catholic family. Existence. It is actually more fragile than we think. My mother one day was on the phone one Sunday morning and described what had just happened over the weekend in nearby Bala, where there was a course going on for young ministers. Fortunately, they would therefore have all been people of prayer. It was during a break in the lectures that one of them was talking to another on the landing, which is quite high up there in this old college. And he had his laptop in his hand, full of notes, precious, of course. He got quite carried away in the conversation and started to make gestures. Alas, the laptop started to get out of control. He lost balance and he was trying to rescue the falling laptop. And he himself lost balance, and 2 seconds later he was in eternity. There are things that can go wrong of our own making. One is suicide, which by now has become quite hygienic. I've not been long back from Holland, from the monastery there where they keep calling me, and I listen to what people have to say. Do you know that there is a fairly high proportion of deaths in that country by now that are brought on by a lethal injection? They call it a life testament. When you're still compos mentis, you have to, if you're in any way intelligent, according to what is thought, put in your life testament that you prefer to die rather than linger. It's actually quite sad. One sees family members at the bedside while the doctor administers this lethal injection. It's not actually the best way to go. You know why? You've got several people there involved in the last lucid moment of a soul, who therefore in the last lucid moment is actually dying against the will of God, doing something which is directly against creation, against the author of life. It's not a good way to start all eternity. And I was talking to someone, and doctors actually aren't happy about them. There is pressure being put on them by the state to go through with all these, as there will be now more and more in Ireland at the other end of life, to stop it before it starts. Very hygienic. It's all covered by medicine. Then there is the more normal version of suicide that we're all used to, unfortunately, because it's everywhere, especially among the youth. And one sees there what a victory it is for you know who. Each suicide is a triumph for the wrong side. I don't say anything about the judgment of the soul, but the whole principle is out of order. And also, the way in which it is normalized and even glorified is dangerous. It's not a good way to die, even on the human level. You know why? Have you ever been at the funeral of a person who has just committed suicide, a young person? Look at the parents. Look at the siblings. It's a cruel act, actually. And that is what is shown to them on the other side, I am quite sure. This is a far remove from where we're coming from. I remember actually in school days, primary school now, we had one lesson years ago as a child about the names of crimes. It was actually an English lesson in the Welsh school, and words like offence is a person who receives a stolen object, and so on, just to get used to the words, what they meant. Parricide, and all the rest of it, killing your father, and then suicide. And we were curious, could this be a crime? Now we're going back here to the 50s and 60s. It was still a crime. And we were told by the neutral teacher, only God has the right to take life. I suppose he's right. This has been actually the belief of the Christian centuries, and until fairly recently in time, a person who did commit suicide was not given a normal burial. I think you know what used to happen. I won't go into that, but it was a lesson at least that these things are not just normal. And do you know that the likes of Shakespeare succeeded in his quiet mission as a crypto-Catholic by keeping a low profile, just until he died, and then he came into the open by receiving the last sacraments as a Catholic, but keeping a low profile, but using the pulpit he had to transmit the faith that he had. It's all 100% Catholic. And if you read between the lines, also it's political at times, but very discreetly. We have his signature, by the way, a bit disguised, but it's there in the Venerable College in Rome, the English college, where he took refuge for a while. William died a Shakespeare, muttered somebody after his death. Sorry, William died a papist. That was a quote given by an Anglican at the time. And I picked up again this, which you all know, but I want to quote in part again to show how these people understood certain things which we've completely brushed aside and normalized to our own detriment. The beyond, the issue, God. Do we cancel things? Listen to a few lines of this, refreshing your memory. One of the high points of our whole literature. Hamlet, Act 3, Scene 1. To be or not to be? That is the question. Whether it is nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of contagious fortune, or to take arms against a sea of trouble and by opposing end them. To die, to sleep, no more. And by a sleep, to say we end the heartache and the 1,000 natural shocks that flesh is heir to. 'Tis consummation devoutly to be wished. To die, to sleep, perchance to dream. There's the rub. For in that sleep of death, What dreams may come when we have shuffled off this mortal coil must give us pause. And on he goes, indicating how awful this existence is, and he goes to a great crescendo, one thing after another. For who would bear the whips and scorn of time? And on he goes, and then he comes to this. To grunt and swear and sweat under a weary life. But the dread of something after death, the undiscovered country, from whose bourne no traveller returns, puzzles the will, and makes us rather bear those ills we have than fly to others that we know not of. And he says how just this thought is strong enough to take away the power of action. Just the other day, the power of action hit me. A lassie of 23 of the travelling community, her name is Marie. I was being bombarded by prayers for this, naturally a bit going next to the body. She was still alive. She tried to end it all. And then she'd taken this colossal overdose and she was losing conscience, but they got her to hospital. She had this moment of lucidity. She said this, "Don't let me die." Some grace had been given her, obviously, at that point. So the doctors tried. Now, they found that there'd been such damage done to her interiors by this colossal overdose that nothing else was going to work except actually to remove the kidney itself and give her a transplant. And the kidney was actually found, which was compatible, and they worked on it with a long operation. They thought they'd got her back. When they took off all the anaesthetic and all they'd had to induce, they actually found that she wasn't responding. She wasn't responding. And she didn't respond. The travelling community were shocked, but they said, because they have faith, at least she said, "Don't let me die." I give you two things, just hot off the press. One was what I wrote when last week in retreat, the week before last now, before the sacrament for a week in this monastery in Holland, giving a retreat to a young nun on the Rue. Compared with what's going out there, these young nuns, they've got it right. Say what you like. They'll get there, and they'll get there with the maximum of merit. Time will be well used. If only people know what actually matters. The other was what I just wrote yesterday, hearing my brother sing again. It's strange, you know, the power of a sound and a melody heard years ago. I'd be in my room and he'd be next door in his room composing away. And it hit me when time, we're talking about 50 years later kind of thing, comes again in the memory. What will have mattered? What is success? What is the use of life and existence? It will only come once, 1 second at a time, 1 day at a time. But it will end. And the then question that matters, the only one. What was my use of these seconds as they passed? Were they filled with grace and merit, or did they go to the wrong thing? Because if they did, there's no coming back. On this journey, there's no rehearsal. It's once only for all eternity.